Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I'm Pat Iyer. This is a podcast that has been sharing content with you, tips, strategies to help you in your business, which I started in September of 2016. We are now in our 9th year, and we love sharing information with you to help you in your practice. Mark your calendars. Our next online conference is taking place February 27, 28, and March 1 of 2025. We have our act together. We've got this conference planned for you and available for you to reserve your seat at the lowest rate by going to lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. That link again is lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. There's no spaces in that link at all, particularly between the February and the virtual. lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. We'd love to have you join us at that conference and get the benefit of the expertise of our speakers and our topics, all designed to give you the knowledge, the support, and the networking that you need as a legal nurse consultant. And now, let's get on to the show. Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of bringing to you a certified trial attorney who has extensive experience, over 35 years, involved in representing clients who have had personal injury, medical malpractice, or other types of injuries occur to them. He has been personally responsible for bringing in more than $150 million in verdicts in that extensive time. And I'm bringing to you today, John Mennie. Welcome, John, to this podcast.
Good afternoon, Pat, and thank you for having me.
Many of our listeners are in the United States and are familiar in broad ways with how claims are paid and how medical care is reimbursed. But for those who are not familiar, let's talk about what happens in the United States when a person is in a car crash and there's a lot of bills, a lot of injuries as a result. Who pays for that?
So, Pat, in all states, just about all states, we have no-fault laws. Now, no-fault laws have been around for some time, and I can tell you that most clients who've been in an accident for the first time, they come into the office, and their first, when I explain no-fault laws to them, they are a little upset. They weren't at fault for an accident. They were injured. They have to get treatment, and I have to tell them that their own insurance company, when they're in a car crash, processes and pays their medical bills, at least initially some of the medical bills. And the reason we have no-fault laws is because years ago, before they had no-fault laws, the parties had to go to court, fight it out, determine who was at fault before the doctors could get paid or they can get treatment. So the no-fault laws, what they do is they provide people immediate access to medical care. The hospitals will get paid, the doctors will get paid, and it allows the injured party to get the treatment that they need. Now, what I would recommend to all your listeners out there is that they be familiar with the particular no-fault laws in the state in which they want to do work for attorneys, because it varies from state to state. For example, in New Jersey, where I primarily practice, the individuals who buy insurance, auto insurance, can choose anywhere between $15,000 and $250,000 in no-fault coverage, also known as personal injury protection coverage, to pay their medical bills in an accident. The importance of that for your listeners is that if they choose an amount which is less than the amount of their medical bills, I personally, and I know a lot of lawyers do, use legal nurse consultants to review those bills that either are outstanding or were not paid by no-fault coverage, and to determine what are usual and customary charges, and to put that into a report. And we may have them testify if the case goes to an arbitration or trial, so that we can get those bills that are not covered by no-fault into evidence. So no-fault coverage is there to provide immediate access to treatment to make sure the hospitals and doctors get paid in a timely fashion.
Is it possible for a person to get behind the wheel and not have any insurance policy at all?
In some states, yes. For example, in Florida, not in most states, but some states they can. It varies again from state to state. In New York, for example, there's 50,000 mandatory in no fault medical coverage. As I indicated, in New Jersey, the individual selects anywhere from 15 to 250,000. It used to be mandatory 250,000. We fought that as trial lawyers because the difference in the price of coverage between a 15 and the 250 is really minimal, maybe $100 difference a year. So I always recommend that people have the maximum coverage. Certainly your listeners out there, hopefully they look at their policy, because if they ask their insurance company, the difference between having the maximum coverage and the minimum coverage is not that much. So some states, to answer your question, don't have it at all. And I know, for example, in Florida, most of the lawyers have to try to have relationships with doctors to get them to treat on a lien basis, which means they have to wait until the case resolves, and then at the end of the case, the doctors will get paid. So it depends. It really varies from state to state. I'd strongly recommend that your listeners, if they want to do work with lawyers in a particular state, that they become familiar with that, because they can provide a valuable service to the lawyers with regard to getting those medical bills ultimately into evidence as part of their client's case.
And I know it's common for legal nurse consultants to go through hospital bills because sometimes there's unrelated charges for other medical conditions that would influence the total number of dollars in that hospital bill, and sometimes duplicate charges. One of my legal nurse consultants who I coached went through her hospital bill and found out that her gallbladder was removed twice.
I'm sure it's not unusual. Hospitals make mistakes, their billers make mistakes. We see that all the time, and that is a valuable service that yourself and other legal nurse consultants provide to attorneys, because obviously if it's a situation where you have a lien for outstanding bills at the end of the case, besides determining whether the charges are usual and customary in the particular area, which is the foundation to get it into evidence, many times there are charges which are unrelated to the accident. So since 95% of the cases settle, even though my office and I think most trial attorneys who do this work prepare every case if it's going to go to trial, you obviously want to get that lien down as low as possible, and a legal nurse consultant can certainly help you that, whether it's a Medicare lien, whether it's a major medical lien, whether it's a doctor who's waiting to get paid at the end of the case. Legal nurse consultant can certainly review those bills and has the expertise to determine what's related and not related.
I know a lot of the work for personal injury attorneys relates to car crashes, but there are infinite number of ways that people can get injured. When you're handling a case, say it's a slip and fall on icy sidewalks that should have been cleared but were not, who pays for the care in that type of situation?
So the majority of time, Pat, in that situation, an individual has to put the care through their health insurance. Sometimes there are policies that whether it's a homeowner or a business that you're bringing a claim against because of their dangerous conditions on a property, for example, they will have what's called medical payment coverage, which is a no-fault provision in the policy. It's very minimal. Usually it's $5,000, maybe $10,000, where you submit the bills before you fight out the issue of who's responsible and what the percentages of negligence are, and they will pay those bills up to that amount. But the majority of time, unfortunately, it has to go through the individual's major medical. Some major medical carriers will then assert a lien against the recovery to get those bills paid at the end of the case if we're successful. And other times, again, we're getting into the federal ERISA laws as to whether the plan that pays the bills is entitled to get paid back or not. But generally, in those situations, other than auto cases where the no-fault laws apply, the individual has to get the medical treatment and the bills paid through their own major medical insurance, or on a lien basis if a doctor's willing to do that.
I would think that those liens would add up and that there would be physicians who would be extremely reluctant to accept liens because they want the cash flow through their office to pay for their staff and overhead. Do you run into that?
All the time. Fortunately, I've been doing this 38 years, so I have a relationship with a lot of doctors who know that we are a very successful law firm, and they'll get paid usually on the back end. I can't guarantee that, but it's very important that we have that kind of relationship with doctors. But yes, it's getting more and more difficult to find doctors who are willing to do that. There are companies out there now that are similar, you probably the ones that your listeners have seen advertised with that provide loans to clients during a case if they're injured and can't work, and they will take a percentage of the case at the end so people can survive. There are companies out there, medical funding companies, that will do that also. If someone needs surgery, for example, and a doctor's not willing to do it. I don't like to do that. Their interest rates are extremely high. I try to dissuade clients to do that and try to get them to, get the money. If their insurance company's not going to pay for it, they don't have good medical insurance to however they can get the money. But that is a safety net that most lawyers do have to get people the treatment. But it is a problem getting people treatment who don't have good major medical coverage in those cases where they're injured, for example, in a construction accident or a fall down or anything other than an auto case where that no fault coverage does apply.
Can you give our listener an estimate of what percentage the loan company would typically take from that final recovery?
It's anywhere between 20 and 30%. It varies from company to company, but it is high. And they get around the usury laws for interest rates being too high because they don't actually, it's a non-recourse, meaning that if you don't win the case, they don't get paid. So it's more like a percentage of the case, and it goes up the longer the case lasts. So, if it's unfortunately, most cases take, 2 to 3 years to resolve. So if somebody has surgery early on in the process, by the time the case resolves in 2 or 3 years, they may owe double, if not more, than what they borrowed from these medical funding companies. It creates a problem for us lawyers on the back end and trying to resolve cases.
And then you just said that if the plaintiff is unsuccessful in winning that case, then the funding company has no recourse. There's no way they can collect the money that they loaned to the injured party.
That's correct. That's how they get around the interest laws and usury interest, and they more there are a lot of them out there. There are currently some regulations because they're not regulated to try to regulate them in terms of what they charge. But it's a very profitable business. A lot of hedge funds are involved in it, and it's unfortunate because they do prey on innocent victims. Again, I try to dissuade clients from doing it, but some people don't have a choice. If they're out of work as a result of their injuries, they have medical bills, they need surgery. They're in a very difficult situation, and we're not going to settle a case too early because we're going to make sure that whatever compensation we get for people, it's going to take care of them for the remaining life expectancy as a result of a permanent injury.
Great point. We talked a little bit about the role of the legal nurse consultant in helping to look at bills, particularly the auto cases. What other services would you recommend that our listener offer to the personal injury attorney?
So legal nurse consultants are for me, they're a great addition to the medical evidence that we get from our doctors, either treating or examining doctors. With regard to just getting back to the point of the medical bills, I know when I have medical bills that are outstanding and I want to get them into evidence, there's two foundational evidential requirements. The first one is we have the doctor testify, hey, doctor, you saw the treatment that Pat received in this accident for the injuries. You reviewed all the records, you reviewed the bills. Was all treatment reasonable and necessary medical treatment for the injuries sustained in the accident? The doctor can say yes. However, The doctor doesn't know what's reasonable, I mean, what are usual and customary charges for those bills. So that's where a legal nurse consultant can come in, look at the bills, determine in a particular area what are usual and customary charges for, maybe it's a fusion surgery or MRIs or EMGs, whatever the treatment is. And then you can have the legal nurse consultant write the report, indicate what the usual and customary charges are, and you can get that into evidence either as part of a settlement brochure, or I've had them certainly testify that, Miss Iyer, you reviewed all the bills, your experience in reviewing medical bills, you understand the codes. Have you reviewed all the bills for the treatment rendered to my client? And were the charges usual and customary charges in the area where where my client lives? Yes, and then those bills go into evidence, and the jury can consider those bills. So that's one area where a legal nurse consultant is very helpful. Another is to summarize the medical records in a manner which is understandable, not only to me, but more importantly, ultimately, to a insurance adjuster, an attorney, and a jury. And I always tell the legal nurse consultants that I use, think about that you're teaching high school kids, right? And make it as simple as possible in terms of the anatomy of the injury. I want show and tell. That's so important nowadays. I want good illustrations in a report that jumps out off the page. I need that wow factor, whether it's giving me, pictures of the entire injuries, maybe a picture of the person pointing to all the different injuries, the good illustration of the surgeries that they had. For example, just a simple thing, if they have an MRI, show the machine and them going, it's a person going into the machine. Or with an EMG, show the needles going in. Or if a person had multiple epidural injections, again, nobody likes needles, show the needles. If somebody took, over a 3-year period, 6 Advil a day, show hundreds of pills. I mean, it makes a difference. And when you do that, I like legal nurse consultants to write their report as if, again, they're explaining it to, just average folks, because the people on the jury are just average folks. They're not lawyers, they're not doctors, and ultimately they really don't know that much about the medicine. So explain it in simple terms as possible. It helps us resolve cases, and it also, if we do proceed to trial, I can just pick up the report and I say, okay, Pat, when we prepare for testimony, I can just use your report, and it saves a lot of time. So summarizing the medical bills, getting the medical bills into evidence, summarizing the injuries in very simple form. And again, legal nurse consultants, can review hundreds and hundreds of pages of records and summarize it into what the person went through and the different procedures very effectively, so that, again, an insurance adjuster, an attorney, and ultimately an arbitrator or a judge and a jury can understand it.
You're touching on something that is one of our strengths, which is the patient education aspect of this, being able to explain things to patients who don't have a medical background in ways that they understand it is part of our training and part of our everyday functioning.
Yes, and I can't tell you how important it is. I know you've been doing it and doing an excellent job, and I'll pat you on the back because you deserve it. I've used you in the past, and along with other legal nurse consultants, and it does make our job easier. I always say, listen, whether it's an independent contractor or an employee, there's 2 reasons to have them. One, to either save you time or money. So I need you, meaning the legal nurse consultants, to save me time and to, just summarize the records in an understandable manner. Because ultimately, when we put together, whether it's a demand package or an arbitration package or a settlement package, again, it has to jump off the page so that it's in the best light for the client, for the patient, and they can say, oh, wow, this person was really hurt, because they're all jaded. Insurance representatives, defense attorneys, everybody's faking, everybody's exaggerating. It's a result of the natural aging process. No, the people that I represent are good, decent, hardworking people through no fault of their own, are now, injured, they're hurting, they don't have the same function that they had before the accident, their body's damaged, and they're entitled to compensation.
Sounds like you've given that talk once or twice, John.
Well, I believe in it. I believe in what I do. We take a beating out there in the press, and I've been around long enough before attorneys were advertising on billboards and all over the place. And I talk to people about that. And oh, you're an ambulance chaser. No, I try to make the world a safer place, and I try to help people with make their lives a little bit better who again are injured through no fault of their own. So I believe in what we do.
You remind me of sitting in the back of the room at an ATLA conference years ago and listening to attorneys talk about the case they handled with a garage door that came down and crushed a toddler. And I didn't realize up until that point that the reason why the safety mechanism was put in place was because the attorneys went after the garage door closers so that there would be a sensor and the garage door would stop if it encountered the obstruction of the child. And that to me was the best illustration of how plaintiff attorneys have made the world safer. And all those children who could have been crushed under garage doors, but were saved because of that mechanism.
There's so many examples of that, Pat. I mean, fireproof pajamas for children. Even in simple examples like, seat belts and airbags. You think manufacturers, it's for them, it's all about profits, right? Profits over people. So yes, we do make the world a safer place, whether they're making sure that our food is safer, obviously in terms of how you prepare the food, just something simple like, going to Chili's and getting something bad that causes, an infection, or something serious, as you indicated, or making cars safer, making car seats safer for children. It's on and on. That's what we do, and we take a beating again in the press because the big business wants to talk about us as being the greedy trial lawyers, but in reality, what we're doing is making them make safer products so that the consumer out there is safer and their family is safer.
I'd like to turn to another money issue. I know you have an undergraduate degree in finance from Florida.
I do. And my Gators had a good weekend. They beat LSU on Saturday, so I was a happy camper.
Gotcha. There are a couple of terms that some of our listeners have heard: the cost of future care versus life care plans. Can you give us an example of the difference between calculating the cost of future care versus doing a life care plan? Before we continue.
Hello, I'm Barbara Levin, and I've been co-hosting the LNC Success Conferences with Patricia Iyer. Today, I'm joined with Nancy Stuck, who is a very seasoned legal nurse consultant and has served as an expert as well as a behind-the-scenes expert on multi-million-dollar cases. She has attended and presented at many of our conferences. Nancy, if you could share your thoughts on the value of our conferences.
Barbara, yes, I just want to invite everybody to these conferences. There's such a wealth of information, and it doesn't matter if you're starting, if you're in the middle, or if you're really seasoned, you always get something from these conferences. And the topics are so various that they go from marketing to getting your first case to how to deal with attorneys. And it's just such great information, and it's really been helpful in helping me build my career.
And I know you've had many networking opportunities and have obtained cases that way as well.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's virtual conference, you see people from all over, and you just get hooked up with these people and go into breakout rooms with them, and you get your next contact, your next case.
Thank you so much. We want you to join us at our next LNC Success Conference. Please see the link below. Look forward to seeing you.
Yes. Well, a life care plan usually comes in those cases where someone has just horrific, serious injuries, whether it's a brain injury where someone has to learn to walk again and talk again, or somebody who is paralyzed. It involves a doctor, first of all, indicating what someone's future needs are going to be, and then the life care planner will determine the cost of those future needs. For someone, for example, who had a client who unfortunately was paralyzed, and my life care planner determined what the cost would be for them to get a van, and to which would allow them to drive and to alter the van, and to put ramps in their house, and to get motorized wheelchairs, and how often they have to be replaced. So in a brain injury case, it may be having somebody, maybe their wife is there now, but if something happens to their spouse, what would the cost be of putting them in, unfortunately, a rehabilitation or nursing home, bringing somebody in, if somebody requires 24 hours care. So it's usually those cases where somebody has catastrophic injuries, and a life care planner is determining the future cost of the person's needs for their remaining life expectancy. On the other hand, I also use, in not catastrophic cases, there's no small case to me. If someone's hurt, they're hurt. But in those cases where someone may not need extensive, a life care treatment that a legal nurse consultant is hired for, I would hire them to determine the cost of future medical care, such as, in many cases, if someone has a spinal injury, a herniated disc, and they don't want to have surgery now, and they may not have surgery at the time the case goes to trial, the nurse consultant will prepare a report and determine, what the cost is of those future procedures, or they may need some pain management throughout their life. Mm-hmm. So it's really a difference in the extent of the injury and what you're trying to price out in terms of the future care. A life care plan is extensive in terms of, again, those catastrophic injuries versus these cases are more often, and I use nurse consultants to do this, to price out the cost of any future surgeries or pain management that someone may use. Again, that goes into evidence as to what that person's damages are. That's part of their damages. If they're going to need that, a case goes to trial in 2 or 3 years. Ultimately, we tell jurors that not only are you to compensate someone for their past damages, their pain, their suffering, their inconvenience, the effect upon the quality and enjoyment of the life, their medical bills and lost income, but into the future. And the doctor says they're going to need these procedures into the future. So, I'll have my nurse consultant testify as to that. The doctor says they're going to need these future procedures. What's the cost of those procedures? Can you describe it? Show me the illustrations of the future procedures. So it's really a difference in the extent of the analysis and report in terms of life care plan versus, pricing out what, not catastrophic care, but the cost of future care.
I have done a little bit of that work in the past, and the first time I got a request for that type of analysis, I was surprised to learn that the cost of the surgery is not only the surgeon, but the use of the operating room, the use of the anesthesiologist, trying to predict how long the surgery would be, because they were blocking out units of time and charging for how much time that operation took. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into that.
Exactly. And also anesthesiologist, post-operative care and physical therapy, all that. Yes. So that's all something that, you need somebody in order to get those damages into evidence. Your doctors, they're so big. They'll give you a diagnosis, prognosis, but they're not going to sit there. They're not going to price all that out. And frankly, they don't even know. And jurors are skeptical of that anyway, because if the good defense attorney will cross-examine the doctor, you have your own billing department, don't you? Yes, you don't get involved in the bills, right? Yes, but you're telling us that this is what it's going to. So, but where a nurse consultant does, that's her specialty. That's what she does, and they'll have the data to back it up.
You mentioned the term pain and suffering, which we know is somewhat of a loaded expression depending upon which side you're looking at. The defense don't like to talk about pain and suffering, but in my experience, plaintiff attorneys are often very focused on that as an element of damages, and can hire a legal nurse consultant as a federal rule of evidence 1006 expert to summarize voluminous medical records. Can you share with us the context by which that would become appealing to a plaintiff attorney?
Yes, I can tell you in my own experience, I've asked some legal nurse consultants to do pain and suffering reports, generally where someone has an extensive period of hospitalization or rehabilitation. I'm involved in a very serious case now where my client was on a motorcycle, had just horrible injuries. Besides a brain injury, also multiple fractures, multiple procedures. He spent 10 months between a hospital and inpatient rehabilitation. So, a legal nurse consultant I hired to go through all the records and to, summarize for me, what he went through in terms of how often was he on Dilaudid, right? The most serious pain medication. How much did he take? What kind of, were highlight in the records where the nurse said that they were in pain and asked the doctor to increase the amount of the Dilaudid or whatever the other pain medications are. What did they go through in the middle of the night? Maybe somebody came in and documented what they went through. So, pain is something that it's different for everyone depending upon, your pain tolerance. Everybody's different, but a jury can understand if a legal nurse consultant can objectively look at the records and say, well, yeah, this is on, during this period of time, the person was on this pain medication, and these are the levels, and these are the side effects of this pain medication, and they had these side effects. So summarizing, what they went through, how long they were unable to even go to the bathroom themselves and get out of bed. It just brings it to life objectively, because people can understand that and say, "Oh my God, yeah, that's." I can understand the extent of what they've been through. Because just saying, just using the terms pain and suffering, what does it mean? But you need to really look at how it's affected someone. What they went through. They're in the middle of the night, they woke up screaming. You really need to bring it to life again. And that's what I don't have the time to go through thousands and thousands of pages of records. And I certainly don't have the time to, summarize it. But, and frankly, although I've been doing this a long time, I may not understand all of the medicine or the procedures or what a nurse did and why they did it. So bringing that to life, putting in a report, giving good illustrations as to what someone went through, and so again, it jumps off the page and you say, oh yeah, that looks painful to me, and they give an illustration of it. Maybe someone suffered from burns, giving, an illustration as to what they go through when they are in a burn unit. Those are the type of things that I think that you want to bring it to life, because listen, we've all suffered from pain, right? We've been burned on a stove. We've had a toothache, a throbbing toothache. Everybody on the jury, you may have had a headache, but you need to describe, is it a throbbing pain? Is it a burning pain? What they went through during that period of time, so that again, it brings it to life.
Yeah, you're stressing a great point, because the jury doesn't understand medical terms and can't even begin to decipher what's in a chart. A nurse has the expertise, the experience to interpret those records. I remember an attorney from Philadelphia who contacted me once and said, I've been going through the records of my client who was injured in a construction site when he fell a distance. And it suddenly hit me, this isn't a good use of my time. I've already put 20 hours into this, and I haven't even begun to make a dent in the records. So a nurse who understands medical records and has those communication skills is a tremendous asset in this role. Absolutely.
And very frankly, jurors love nurses. They like nurses. They like teachers. They like people who provide, services. So that's another reason why I like to use the nurse consultants. besides the educational aspect of it, they're there, right? Most nurses have worked in either a hospital setting or a patient care setting before they became a legal nurse consultant. I believe you did too, Pat, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you didn't just become a general. You were out there, you were part of the infantry, right? So you had your hand on the pulse of what's going on. So you know what goes on in the hospital. I've never worked there, and you can so go through those records and know what the person went through and what those records mean. So bringing them to life, again, simple, but it has to jump out. It has to be a show and tell. I remember one time years ago, you did a report for me and you just lined up the different needles in the report for all the different procedures that, all the time someone had a needle in their arm, right? For whether it's an IV, whether it's a EMG, whatever it was. And you look at it, oh my God, look at all the needles that person had, right? That's something that the average person is like, man, they wanted to do that. The same thing I gave an example earlier with pills, right? Once I brought in a bucket and had all filled with, aspirin just to show the pills that it didn't take aspirin, but it was, serious medication just to show the jury, this is what they've taken up to this. And they're probably going to take every year for their lifetime, that amount of pills. So it just, again, it brings it to life. It shows, it's not just, oh, I'm in pain. What does that mean? When you say, I have burning pain down my leg, it feels like a blowtorch, that won't go away. And I just wanted someone to cut off my leg, or that's why I went into surgery and had back surgery. It explains it. So that's really, I need you to go through the records, explain it, because we ultimately have to present this in a way that you're an advocate, just like we are for the patient, and you want to explain what they went through in simple terms, but very, very powerful terms.
There are so many examples of things that we have found in medical records. I'm thinking about a man who was catastrophically burned in an electric fire, and he spent a long time on a ventilator. The legal nurse consultant who summarized his records as one of my subcontractors found the term bucking the ventilator in the medical records and explained it to the attorney, who had never heard the term of air being forced into the lungs at the same time the person's trying to breathe out. And that disparity causes tremendous stress for the patient. They literally feel like they can't breathe. He was so fascinated by that term, which was just, a normal matter-of-fact term for somebody who was familiar with the charting, but didn't understand it from the attorney's perspective. Wow, this is an incredibly uncomfortable experience. And I watched you shaking your head as I was describing it, thinking about what it'll be like to be on a bed and literally not being able to take a deep breath because that machine is pushing air in at the wrong time.
Yeah, it feels like you're choking to death. Oh, for
Yes, indeed.
24 hours a day. Yeah, that's a perfect example of what a legal nurse consultant can look at and find in the record. So yes, and that, again, that's to an attorney who doesn't understand it. You just made portion of their case, right? They're gonna, like I would just go to a jury and say my client felt like they were choking to death 24 hours a day. Imagine what that felt like, right? How much is that worth per minute, right? So yeah, that's a perfect example. Perfect example.
I have two more questions for you. The first is, you've worked with legal nurse consultants. You know what comes across to you as being a successful component of work product. You get in that report either physically or by email. What are some of the things that make a difference for you as an attorney when you're looking at the work product of a legal nurse consultant?
I think you hit the nail on the head with that last example. I mean, you wanted to jump again off the page so that could listen. I always require my nurse consultants, all experts, to first give me their reports in draft, so that I'll review it and I may discuss it and make some recommended changes. But the more time I have to put into it, again, why am I hiring somebody, right? So the work product that I get back, that draft report, I want it to be as detailed as possible in terms of explaining in simple terms. Again, you got to understand who your audience is. Ultimately, your audience are people, whether it's an insurance adjuster, defense attorney, judge, or a jury. Always keep focused on the jury. I do that from the time my client comes in, and a legal nurse consultant writing a report should do that also, to bring the injuries to life. I hire you to be an advocate, to explain the medical evidence as simply and as powerfully as possible. So I want to get that report with good illustrations, which a lot of it we talked about, the procedures, the MRIs, the needles, the EMGs. Don't just tell me they went through it. Show me what they went through, put it in your report, as if you were going to always think, and all your legal nurse consultants out there, if I'm testifying before a jury, again, who has no medical background, legal background, how do I want to present this and bring it to life to explain what this person went through, and in terms of the procedures, the pain, the discomfort that they went through, the medications that they had, so that ultimately a jury can understand it and say, you know what, this person went through a lot, and I want to do what's right by them. So keeping it simple, good illustrations, explaining it, bringing out things that I wouldn't even understand, as you just indicated with the individual that was on the ventilator, because that's a great example, Pat, because if you think about it, defense attorneys and insurance just say, well, they didn't feel any pain. They were on a ventilator. What they were unconscious. What the machine was doing over the work from. They're just laying there. What pain or discomfort did they have? So finding those kind of things is just great. That's a great, example. And we need those nuggets, but always keep focused on who ultimately, if I present this case before a jury, me as an attorney, I want to pick up that report, prepare you for, if I have to, 95% of the cases settle, but in those 5%, I prepare every case that's going to go to trial. It's like a boxer. You better be ready to get in that ring. If you're not, you're going to get knocked out. So you may not have to, I don't know if anybody saw the fight this weekend, Mike Tyson. That was pathetic, but he should have never been in there. But, just always understanding what the attorney needs. The attorney needs you to summarize it in simple form, so that always think about the questions that he would ask you and the answers that you would give, and put those into the report.
And then my last question would be, how can our listener find out more about you and the services that your law firm offers?
Sure. So the easiest way would probably go to our website. My website are my initials, JGM Law Group. .com. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. I'm certainly here for you. I'll be glad to answer any questions that your listeners have. I have a great team. I have people that have worked for me all 38 years. I believe I talked a little bit about generals. Yeah, I may be a general, but I take care of my infantry. And if I was a doctor, I would have taken care of the nurses on the floor. I believe in that. I believe in a team approach. I believe in the cliche that teamwork makes the dream work. And certainly legal nurse consultants can be valuable. They are for me, and for most attorneys, a valuable member of the team to help ultimately us to present the medical evidence to an insurance adjuster, a defense attorney, arbitrator, and a judge and a jury. That's ultimately what you're doing. So when a good thing you can do, because I get emails all the time, every day, from legal nurse consultants all over trying to solicit business. Know the law in the state where, if you're going to try to solicit business from an attorney, again, you can start out with simple things like we talked about, the medical bills. Tell them you're a billing expert, and you can present a report on usual and customary charges, or give me an example. Give them an example. Send an example. Just a few pages of maybe illustrations, again, that jump off the page. But I'd be glad to help anybody out. Anybody has any questions, call me, call my team, jgmlawgroup.com.
Thank you very much, John. This has been very helpful. I know that you have created some great tips and strategies for legal nurse consultants who are listening to this program. And you've emphasized over and over again, which I appreciate, the fact that attorneys are looking for the wow factor. And I think that's so important to emphasize, because we can become jaded. Oh, it's an MRI machine. Oh, looks like a big donut. Or yeah, that person got epidural injections. What does that actually mean? We see it all the time, so it doesn't have a shock value for us, just like the things that you see all the time might shock lay people. And it's a great reminder that when we can translate words into images, that has an impact in helping another person understand what the patient went through.
Exactly. Just a simple thing, like you said, with an MRI. If you didn't have ever had an MRI and you see that machine, you go, "Oh my God, that looks like a coffin," right? I mean,
I hope not.
yeah, I know, but I'm just the point is that just think about, like you said, you know it and I know it, and defense attorneys, oh, they had an MRI, they had an epidural. You bring it to life, because people on the jury may have never had it. They don't understand it. So, yeah, legal nurse consultants are invaluable to presenting the medical evidence in an understandable fashion to your ultimate audience, who are going to hopefully do the right by your client, and that is the jury.
Thank you, John, for your time and your attention and your expertise.
It's my pleasure, Pat, and best of luck to all your audience. And I appreciate all of you out there, you nurses, for everything that you do each and every day for us.
Yeah, it's not an easy profession in many respects, and yet it's so rewarding.
Yes, exactly. And thank you.
You're welcome. And to you who's been watching this program, be sure to go to legalnursebusiness.com for your free reports. I offer tips, blogs, and a variety of resources to help you grow your legal nurse consulting business. Coming up next, you'll have an opportunity to meet a nursing professor who has her doctorate in nursing, who is a specialist in the concept of nurse burnout syndrome and nurse traumatization, a factor that influences us in our clinical role and also in our role as entrepreneurs working with attorneys. My next guest is Dr. Lori Laws, and I'm going to ask you, Lori, if you could give our listener or our viewer just a taste of the topics that we covered in your podcast.
Well, we covered a lot of ground in a short time, and really we started untangling the difference between nurse burnout syndrome and nurse-specific traumatization, which is a relatively new concept in the evidence base, and a new middle range theory around that we can use in our practices, including legal nurse consultant practices. And then we kind of unpacked a little bit, like, what is this? How do nurses specifically nurses get traumatized in our professional roles? And importantly, what can we do about it? How can we prevent nurse-specific traumatization? How can we differentiate it from burnout? And what's a practice? What's a key practice that the listener can walk away with and do in under 30 seconds, even under the busiest of days, throughout the busiest of days? So we talked about that and so much more, and I do hope that you'll join us in the next episode.
Thank you so much, Lori. You'll have to tune in to find out what Lori is referring to when we talk about a simple practice that will help shift your perspective and deal with some of the more common stresses that you encounter in your life. Dr. Lori Laws is our next guest on Legal Nurse Podcast, and I hope you'll come back and watch her show on YouTube on our Legal Nurse Business channel, or listen to it on all of the audio channels. Take care, and I will see you again soon. Thank you for being part of our audience of Legal Nurse Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this session and you got some great tips from it. I would love to see you at our February 2025 LNC Success Online Conference that will be our 11th conference, taking place February 27, 28, and March 1. You can get your ticket by going to lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. I'd love to see you there.